Honestly, I'm really happy to bring back this What We Learned series. I actually really enjoy making these videos. I like dissecting the games, looking at the reports, the stats, and like extrapolating like key insights that we learned from the prior games. And listen, even though the season has been and continues to remain an absolute mess, at least we finally have some positivity to discuss, because it has been a long time since anything positive has been related with this football club. So my friends, in today's What We Learned video, I want to discuss 4 key things. We have to discuss Noni Madueke. I mean, I absolutely love this kid. We have to talk about Felix and Kai Havertz, who should be playing up front from now on. Let's talk Frank Lampard and him going back to basics and what he knows best. And of course, let's dissect this game in numbers and in details too. So my friends, share your thoughts and opinions. Hit that like button if you're happy to see this series return. Ideally, I'd love to get over 2k likes. That would be amazing if that can happen. And without wasting any more time, so right now, let's talk Joao Felix and Kai Havertz. Out of these 2 players, who should be continuing to play up front until the season ends? Now, both Felix and Kai Havertz were tasked with playing more like deep lying forwards, or maybe even false nines. They both had to leave their starting positions, drop a bit deeper. This allowed them to like kickstart the play, to kickstart new attacks. This allowed them to receive balls in behind the opposition's midfield lines. And anytime these guys did drop deeper, it did encourage a lot of verticality. It did encourage a lot of players to make runs in behind into that vacated space. And in my opinion, I felt like this is probably the best way to use either one of Felix or Kai Havertz up front, because these guys are more like false 9 players in my personal opinion. Right now, let's compare the statistical performances of each player. Joao Felix was ranked with a 7.2 match rating. We can see with this heat map over here, he was leaving his starting position, and a lot of the times when he was receiving balls, it was ball out the half spaces and more down the left hand side. And as we can see here, listen, he only played like 11 minutes, but during that time, decent sample size, expected goal threat of 0.14, got 1 shot at least, 5 out of 6 accurate passes. And defensively, of course, he was contributing to the high press, which was allowing us, of course, to kickstart more attacks in Bournemouth's half. Comparing that to Kai Havertz though, Havertz ranked 6.4 with his average match rating. But as we can see with the heat map, you can see the concentrated areas right here in reds, right? Where he's predominantly receiving in that half space channel, and he is dropping deeper a lot of times, and most of his build up and play and touches are being received more down the right hand side. So already, Felix is more down the left, and Kai Havertz is more down the right. And obviously that makes a lot of sense, because Kai is playing to a stronger foot on the right hand side, and Felix is playing to a stronger foot on the left hand side. In terms of stats right here, Havertz had an expected goal threat of 0.32. Wasn't the best. In terms of shots, barely nothing. The only shot he did have was off target. And in terms of like accurate passes and touches, it's more like his build up and him creating that numerical overload to allow us to actually dominate the flanks against Bournemouth. But to be honest with you, this is where stats do have their limits, because watching the game with your own 2 eyes, you'll see that Havertz found himself in tons of great positions and he wasn't found by his teammates. So naturally, that's going to skewer your ability to really affect the game if you're not being found by your teammates. And I guess for me, this is where I want to have a conversation right now, because when Havertz plays on the right hand side, it seems like he now has Madueke, Kante and others combined with. But as we can see with like the pass maps on the left hand side, even though Lampard's plan is to build up on the right, free up the left hand side, that left hand side could probably benefit maybe more from a Joao Felix linking up with like Ben or whoever's playing fullback, Madueke especially on the left hand side. And I think if that was the case, Felix would help unlock Madueke a bit more by allowing him to play closer to goal. And as you guys are seeing with the territory in yesterday's game, I felt like at times, Ben and Madueke haven't necessarily played tons of games together. Their combination plays at times were a little bit iffy, like their understanding of each other's runs and movements. And at times it did feel like there was like a bit of a clash in terms of who was going to attack the space on the left hand side between Ben and Madueke. But I think with Felix's introduction, especially with how we saw Sterling and him combine to make that 3rd goal, this move was kickstarted by Joao Felix, playing one-touch football, dropping deeper, that combo play alongside Ruben. And then by him dropping deeper, that's encouraging a 4-player like Sterling to run into that space, right? He has vertical spaces to run into. And this then allows Joao Felix to make that third man running behind, that supportive run. And then Sterling plays a cutback pass back to Felix, and he scores our third goal to seal the game. Now, this is my personal hunch and my personal opinion, but now that we have a Madueke that is a lot more comfortable playing by himself on the right-hand side, I don't think Mudryk can do what Madueke does, and I do think in terms of having a proper technician like Felix closer towards him, a technician like Felix that's attracting and commanding the attention of the opposition teams, I do feel like Felix is able to help create a bit more verticality and a bit more movement in behind. I think with Felix's ability to create opportunities for himself, he has slight technical edges to his game that Kai doesn't have, even though Kai makes up for that with his extra pressing and that sense of physicality that he can provide for the team when it's needed to. If I had to give my answer, the diplomatic answer would be you turn to using both right, because with how we are right now, you know, whoever starts, whoever ends, both need to play. But in terms of starting, I probably want to see Felix playing against Nottingham Forest next Saturday. In that type of position up front where we can kind of pick up his defensive slack, could be something useful for us when it comes to breaking down these low block defensive teams. So that's the first thing we learned out the way. Now for the second thing we learned, we must discuss Noni Madueke, because it's starting to seem and look like that right hand side is now his position. And I actually think breaking down his game reveals why he is by far the best choice to use down that right hand side. Now, Noni has definitely grown since being given more responsibility and minutes in the team. I thought his performance yesterday against Bournemouth definitely picked up even more from his very impressive performance against Arsenal. And you can see at the end of the game with how Silva really embraced him and really praised him for his game, just how well Madueke did play against Bournemouth yesterday. Lampard also seemed to be incredibly happy with Madueke's impact too, and I guess let's break down exactly why Madueke was so impactful against Bournemouth. Now to start with things, SofaScore gave Madueke a 7.3, WhoScored gave him a 7.4, doesn't really matter, but looking at his heat map positions, you can see the area of dominance he was having down that right hand side. I mean, look how red those zones and areas are, and you know, I think someone like Madueke with his profile in his game does suit how Lampard ideally likes his teams to play, by focusing on using width, by focusing on using wide play, and focusing on encouraging the wingers, of course, to be more involved in helping us break teams down. As we can see here, Madueke recorded 3 shots against Bournemouth yesterday, joint highest alongside Vina down that side too. Passing success around 77%. You know, really involved in the build-up, good accuracy. Dribbling, by far the most dominant dribbler in yesterday's game, recording 6 successful dribbles. That is very, very impressive. Going back to SofaScore, they gave him a 0.31 expected goal rating, and for expected assists, that was around 0.11. And I do feel like in certain areas like this, Noni will, of course, improve by getting more game time playing in that position. But I think another impressive part and feature of his game yesterday was his ability to press from the front and help defend with the team. For example, ground duels, you know, 13 attempts, 7-1. He only got fouled once, but it is kind of hard to foul Madueke because this guy is not only technical, but he's also powerful as well too. And he recorded 1 clearance, and I think that was that moment where he ran all the way back into our own half to defend against Christie. Really good type of application defensively. And it's stuff like that that's going to further encourage Frank Lampard to keep using Madueke down that right hand side. And you can see the stats right here. I mean, you look at the territory in which he's defending off the ball. That's a lot of responsibility there, but Madueke has that engine to play in both boxes. Looking at things in even more detail, you're looking at progressive carries and successful dribbles. I mean, that ability to carry us up the field with like his skillful close control runs is a very helpful thing. And it's no surprise why we saw Chalobah making a lot of overlapping runs, because Madueke, of course, being that inverted winger, is creating the spaces out wide, and by having a guy like this is pinning back the opposition fullbacks, because a lot of times in our past few games here, opposition teams' fullbacks really contribute by pushing up into our half and really pinning us back. So having a guy like Madueke offers us a lot of like tactical surprises. But of course, there were a few times where maybe the decision making wasn't perfect, but it's not going to be at this age, especially when he hasn't been playing week in, week out. So I can forgive that. But for me, I'm looking at a guy on the right hand side that's looking very complete for a winger of his profile. I mean, not only does this guy have the physicality. I mean, he's really adapted very easily to Premier League football. It's how he can get past his man that really excites me and impresses me. He can do the little quick shimmies to quickly, find a new angle and instantly burst and accelerate away. He has the footwork and the close control. He can also just power past you and beat you over a distance. He's explosive. He's comfortable playing down the flank by himself. He can link up with his teammates. And most importantly, this is a kid that can also defend and press up from the front and come back and help defend with his fullback too. For a 21-year-old, I'm looking at this signing with completely new eyes right now. I think this was an incredibly shrewd buy, and I'm really excited to continue to see how Madueke develops, because right now, this kid is showing a lot of promise and really positive things. So I guess now for the third thing we learned, let's examine the game by breaking down yesterday's game in the stats, the numbers, and all that good stuff. Now, using SofaScore again, because I'm really liking this website, we can see that throughout the entirety of the game, our expected goals was 1.35 compared to Bournemouth's, which was 1.29. But in terms of expected assists, Bournemouth created better goal scoring opportunities. They didn't take them. But comparing the first half performance, our expected goal threat was still better than Bournemouth's. And in the second half, Bournemouth just about edged things. But looking at both halves, I'm liking that there's a bit of symmetry behind how we were playing and what the game plan was to break down Bournemouth. I think the key thing to reflect how well balanced our game was like this continued expected threat throughout the entire game, because recently there's like small spurts of momentum we have, and most times the opposition team have great momentum against us. Bournemouth, decent attacking team, they provided us dangerous moments at times, especially when Kante came off, and then they really peppered us good for 5-10 minutes, but we rode through that. That's the important thing, and it's the Premier League, so at times you are going to have to ride your luck against the opposition, no matter who they are. But the most important thing is that we've reacted well, and this level of expected threat was kind of consistent throughout most of this game. And as we're seeing with the average positions as well too, in his way, it's kind of like a makeshift back three. Jalab is playing a really good inverted type of fullback role, very good squad player, of course, central occupation, and most importantly, there was opportunities for combo plays. Players were able to link up with each other and not be isolated by themselves, trying to figure out what to do by themselves, just being the main thing behind why we don't score any goals this season. So the shape was a real big positive, to be fair with you, and Lampard definitely got things right. Now, looking at overall stats, we have possession of 66% compared to Bournemouth's 34%. Total shots was quite even with Bournemouth's, and I think that's because both teams had a similar game plan. Focus play down the right flank and then free up spaces down the left flank. And that's definitely how we conceded that incredible team goal, where Vina scored that excellent goal outside the box. For me, I still commit to the fact that this is one of the best goals we've conceded this season, because that was great football. In terms of scoring opportunities, it was very even with Bournemouth. We both had 7 kicks. Thank God we weren't offside once in this game today. And I actually think when you're using more of a false 9 guy and you're encouraging the runs in behind from the wingers, that's probably going to discourage the amount of offsides which we're notoriously known for over the past few seasons. And the key thing that separated us and Bournemouth is that I think in God knows how long, it's finally a game where we have 0 big chances missed compared to Bournemouth. So that was the key thing, and I think obviously that Kepa save from that 1v1 moment was the key save of the game to really help maintain us, because during that period, Bournemouth were putting quite a bit of pressure on us once we made those substitutions by replacing Kante. And in that sense, Kepa was only tested 3 times, but in terms of goals prevented, so normally if you're seeing a minus number, basically this means that the goalkeeper conceded more goals than expected, but Kepa only conceded 0.04. And I think that goal scored against Vina was that good that personally I can't fully hold Kepa accountable for that moment. I think it's a teamwork thing. I think there's no smoke without fire. And for every time Kepa isn't saving a long shot, why is there so much space outside the box, encouraging teams to have all the time in the world to set themselves up to take these perfect strikes against us? But I guess one thing I liked too in yesterday's performance was that, a lot of times we were playing against a team that was sitting back, hoping to play against us in the counter-attack, and there was a lot of purposefulness behind our play and what we were doing. Now, using who scored in terms of the overall performances from individuals, there's a lot of guys ranking in the 7s and over 6.5, which is a good reflection of how we were able to, create opportunities against Bournemouth. Conor Gallagher scoring the first goal, great goal he scored. Kante's influence in terms of helping us win the ball higher up the field was also there. Of course, the assist he played into corner, and just that ability to combine with Noni and Jeff down that right hand side. So I guess right now I'm going to leave things here. We've got an idea and an understanding of the numbers behind yesterday's game, but to end things, I want to talk Frank Lampard, because the final thing I learned is that it seems like Frank Lampard has accepted, let me go back to my roots, because the performance I saw yesterday was reflective of the performances I used to see in Lampard's second spell as our manager. And I think, considering the talents and profiles we have in this squad right now, this complements most of these guys, and I'm going to explain why. Now let's continue to look at the stats yesterday, and one glaring stat that sticks out to me, which really helped our ability to, find opportunities against Bournemouth, was our dribbling stats. I mean, we had 15 compared to their 8. And most times we aren't ranking that high recently in terms of dribbles, and successful ones in particular. I mean, Noni was key and Kante were key. Together their 9 combined dribbles down that right hand side was really helping us force back Vina, was really helping attract Bournemouth towards that side, and it was freeing up spaces down the opposite flank. Unfortunately, Ben and Madueke needs a bit more time to really understand each other's game. I think at times, and I think the stats do show this, and the pass maps as well, it seemed like they were getting in each other's way at times. It looks like Ben was close to the goal a bit more than Madueke was ideally. But going back to the dribbles, we attempted 27 and we won 15 of them, which is, pretty decent. And I think when you're combining Kai Havertz, leaving his striker role, leaving the opposition defenders with no one to mark, because he's drifting into that right channel to link up even more, it created a lot of disruption. And going back to looking at the average pass map right now, this is where Enzo Fernandez is really key to have, I guess, playing a more reduced role compared to roles we've seen prior, because he is isolated by himself in the middle, and he's that key guy when it comes to connecting the right side of the field to the left side. Going back to SofaScore, we're seeing the average heat map of Enzo. He's just literally in these very, very central areas, being that supportive figure in the middle to continue the rotations of attacks, to continue the intensity of attacks and plays as well. And as we're seeing, a 94% accurate pass rate, that's really good. 94 touches, had a lot of the ball in yesterday's game. And the great thing about Enzo that guys like Jorginho couldn't do is that he can play accurately off the ground, which is even better when you need to find your wingers isolated in 1v1 spaces, right? I mean, 11 out of 13 attempted. Jorginho never ever got to double digits for balls off the ground. Same thing with Cover too. So Enzo's passing does provide different opportunities for us to break teams down. Of course, the risk is that he is going to be dribble passed a few times. He doesn't have the engine of a Kante to be that enforcer in the middle. But I think against teams like Bournemouth and Co that will sit back, this is more than adequate in my opinion. But going back to the pass map, for me, this is reflective of a more cohesive play and understanding where players actually understood each other's games, their runs and their movements. Now, it wasn't 1000% perfect, because we haven't played this way consistently throughout the entirety of the season. Who knows what could have happened if we actually did, but it's a promising sign, because if you look at the second half against Arsenal, where we reverted back to playing this same way that we played against Bournemouth yesterday, we scored 1 goal, we didn't concede another goal in that second half, which is a small, tiny W to take. So to know that those same principles really worked even more against Bournemouth, it's a promising thing, at least based on the context of this season. We're seeing the overlapping runs of the fullbacks, which is key, and when you have guys like Silva and Benoit at the back, Benoit, great goal he scored against Bournemouth, super delivery from Ziyech, but look at his pass map. This guy is composed on the ball, and he's very comfortable playing those line-breaking passes. You can see in his heat map that a lot of times he's looking to find guys on the left-hand side a lot of times, and when we're getting pressed and closed down, Benoit is moving himself more to a left-back position to help us progress the ball up the field. So this is a top young defender, and it makes sense because this guy's played nearly 200 career games already, and he's only 21 years old. And this is reflected in the stats, because look how high Benoit's ranking when it comes to progressive passes being made. So he's a little secret weapon to have out from the back, and the competition between him and Cole is going to be very tight and tense from next season, because both these guys can play this way to a very high level at a very young age. For me, let's not end things by, focusing on what Frank Lampard said after the game. And for me, this was literally music to my ears, because Lampard was okay, with the season about to end, it makes more sense for me now to start turning to youth. And as I've said in previous videos, these guys are going to be here in our long-term future. Let's get them more integrated. Let's get these guys more acclimatized to playing with each other, etc, etc. And with the benefit and bonus being that Pochettino is probably going to replace Lampard very soon. And Pochettino's ideas and principles aren't far removed from what we're seeing. Obviously, they're a bit more elevated for sure. But the principles in terms of how he wants the team to play, break teams down, etc, etc. We're seeing the small glimpses right now of what we could be like with more time playing this way under Pochettino for next season. It's nice that Lampard's finally realised this. It's a shame that this wasn't the first way of playing straight from the start, because honestly, I think we wouldn't have lost 6 games in a row, to be honest with you. It's a shame it's taken this long, but with seasons like this where nothing is going right, everything's going wrong, I guess this stuff is expected. So my friends, on that note, these are the 4 things we learned against Bournemouth yesterday. Share your thoughts and opinions. How do you feel about the game? If you have insights or observations that you want to share, let us all know what they are in the comments below. And like I said, let's try and get over 2k likes for today's video. So I'm EFC, this is BlueLionsTV. I'll catch you guys later with some more videos.